In this video, I'm going to show you how to do this and control your home automation from an M5StickC. Let's do it. There are some prerequisites for this video. This diagram shows what I like to call a stack of home automation solutions that you need to have set up for this to work. But don't switch off if you don't have them, it's not that big a deal. I won't show you directly how to set up the stack in this video, but I will tell you where to go to do that, or I will link to my own tutorials or make some if I can't find any. All the software used here is really useful anyway, so even if you don't already use them, you may want to check it out. For example, I ignored nodered for ages because I didn't want the hassle of trying to work out what it was and what it did, but now I have it, it's really useful and I wouldn't be without it. Of course, as a side note, you can substitute parts of the stack yourself quite freely. Home automation systems can be fairly modular. For example, if you want to use Home Assistant instead of nodered, go ahead, you can do that. Now, to just run through the stack quickly, we have the M5StickC, which is what we're dealing with today. This will send messages to what's called an MQTT server, which is just a small program that you can run on pretty much any computer, and it's especially suited to something like a Raspberry Pi. I think of MQTT as SMS for microchips, because that's almost how it works, although if you want to be technical, I suppose it's more like news groups, if you remember those. Now next, the MQTT server will pass the message onto nodered, which is doing the hard logic here of translating that message into an actual call to the Hue API. Nodered is a flow-based program that's super easy to use, even if you have no coding knowledge, and it's super stable, which is why I like to use it. It's sort of like IFTTT if you've used that, but it's better because it allows things like decisions and delays and even multiple actions based on one input. So I suppose you call it maybe if this, then maybe that, or perhaps something else a bit later, or perhaps nothing at all. I mean, yeah, I guess the name nodered probably works better, but, you know, whatever. Now, nodered, of course, finally talks to the smart device in question, which in my case is a Hue hub, but of course you can use any smart device that nodered supports. And it's worth noting that if we look at this diagram here, all you need to do all of this well and using almost no power is a Raspberry Pi. You can run nodered and Mosquito, which is the MQTT server that I use. You can run both of those on a Raspberry Pi. And if you have a Raspberry Pi 4, I would recommend checking out my tutorial linked below on how to set up Docker on a Pi 4. Without going too far off course, I run Docker on all my Pi servers because it just allows provisioning, setting up things, configuration, and being able to, of course, back up or move things to another Pi or another computer. It makes it a 5-minute process instead of having to, kind of have things interacting on the same operating system. I know a lot of this terminology might be alien if you haven't used it, so I don't want to put you off the main process. And while using Docker is something I really recommend, if you're not that big on, programming, don't worry about it. What we need to focus on here is the project at hand, and this is M5Stick to MQTT server to nodered to a smart device, e.g. Hue hub. The M5Stick, in case you haven't seen it before, is a low-cost and very functional ESP32-based device with an onboard battery and a colour TFT, and it includes a very limited I/O breakout on either end, and 2 user-accessible buttons. If you buy one of these, I recommend the kit that I have with the hats for the speaker and environmental sensors. It also comes with a cool strap, so your home automation can happen on your wrist. It truly is the future. Programming the M5Stick is done in the Arduino IDE. You need to install the M5Stack boards and libraries. This is a 2-step process. I will link below. In order to use the M5Stick in the Arduino IDE, you need to do both of these steps. For this project, you will also need to install a library called PubSub Client. Now make sure you get the right one, as there's a few with a similar name to this, and it's the one on screen here by Nick O'Leary. This library contains the functions that you need to talk to the MQTT server, which, if you remember, is running on, say, a Raspberry Pi separately. Finally, you need my code to begin with. As always, it's linked in the description and it's on GitHub. You should note that this code is very much a demo and it's intended for you to customize to your own needs. It has all the functionality that I'm using in the video, but if you want to extend, it's a good start point. I will briefly run you through what the code does in a moment, but I just want to cover how MQTT works first because it won't make sense unless you understand that. MQTT is a protocol that allows us to send a message to another system. If you think about, for a moment, the messages that you need to send, it makes sense as to why we use MQTT and why it's so simple. When we press the button on the M5Stick, essentially we need to send two things. We need to send which device we need to change state on, and what we want the new state to be. For example, we could send bathroom and on. But what if we only want to tell those devices that are actually even caring about the bathroom light? Or more generally, what if we only want to tell those devices that care about lights at all? What if we don't want to send that information to, say, environmental sensors that are sending temperature information? And this is pretty much how MQTT works. You have a topic, which can be formed of subtopics, and you have a payload, which can be pretty much anything you specify. With regard to the topic, you have a general topic, for example, hue, and then a more specific one, for example, bathroom. And you separate this with a slash. You could just as easily use lights and bathroom. This is pretty much analogous to how we use URLs these days. For example, if you're accessing an API, you might call http:/home-server/hue/bathroom, and you would post something like state equals on. And the MQTT equivalent to that is to publish to the topic hue/bathroom, with the payload of the string being just a character string on. So as you can see, this is not actually that complicated. Finally, though, there is some intricacy with the topic. You can use wildcards to subscribe to any level of detail. For example, I've nodered here. I've subscribed to listen to any message that starts with hue. So I'm using hue/#, and that works as a wildcard to pick up any messages that start with hue. So onto the code. I don't like to dwell on code because it gets pretty boring, quite frankly. Rather, I prefer to make it available for you to download, so please do so. The basis for the code was borrowed from some very easy to understand code that I found online, which I'll link below. It's called M5StickC MQTT button by someone called Zeno Forever. So thank you to him for writing something that was easy for me to understand and use as a basis for my code. At the top here, what we're doing is we're importing the libraries, and there's also a config file. This is just to keep the Wi-Fi info secret and separate. It's just good practice. Then we're initializing those variables here, and we're setting up also an array of our room names. The M5Stick only has 2 accessible buttons, so I have had to dedicate a GPIO on the side to a third button to control changing which room we're turning on or off. This is pin 26. There is a callback function here that currently just logs to the serial monitor, but I've left it in because if you wanted to see other events sent over MQTT in your own code, then this is how you do it. So it's working the same way as nodered. If any messages are sent through the MQTT server that start with hue, it's subscribed to them, so it will receive them. And this is a good demo of how you request the MQTT server to show you certain messages. This is how you subscribe to the topic. Now the setup code is pretty straightforward. It's just a message on the screen to wait until the Wi-Fi has connected, and this then connects to the MQTT server and displays the first room name. The main loop here just looks to see if any of the 3 buttons have been pressed. It's pretty simple the way I've programmed it. A and B are on and off respectively, and it will send, which in MQTT terminology is actually the word publish. It will publish an on or off message respectively. It also does some ancillary code to update the LCD display just to let you know that it's done so. The third button here changes the room. And that's all the code does. Now to make it work, you just need to upload it to an M5Stick. And you need to add a switch at the side. I'm using the push button on a rotary encoder simply because the pin spacing is ideal, but it also looks slightly steampunk. The actual encoder pins are not used here. You could actually modify the code to change rooms by turning the encoder instead of pushing the button. And my last video actually on ESP32 did include the code you need to use a encoder in ESP32. So if you are interested in doing that, go and watch that video. Now, you need to make sure that nodered is listening for these messages in the first place, which is a simple matter of adding a node to listen to the MQTT server, which I showed you before, but here it is again. And then you add functions for each room, and then you send the right signals through. Here's the code to do that. You can literally just use this exact code here. Yes, my Hue hub is called Barney McGrew. You'll either get that joke or you won't. And that's pretty much it. This should then control the lights. You'll probably be surprised at how quick and reliable it is. For me, it's quicker than using the actual official Hue switchers. Now, it's worth finishing by saying that all of this, except the LCD operations on the M5Stick, all of this will transfer directly onto an ESP32. And I think it can be made to work on an Arduino too, although honestly, I don't think it's worth trying because the ESP32 has the onboard Wi-Fi that works well. But you can get Arduinos with Wi-Fi and you can add Wi-Fi or Ethernet shields. I don't think it's worth it because if we look at the sizing and the pricing, the ESP32 does have an advantage here. Obviously, that could change in the future, so depending on when you're watching this video and how much each costs. You could probably get MQTT clients for other microcontrollers too. I'm sat here wondering if there is one for the micro bit. I imagine there probably is, although it doesn't have Wi-Fi, does it? So yeah. Anyway, that's it. If you have any questions, then the comments section is below and I will answer even if I have no idea what the answer is. That's just how I roll. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next M5 video where I'm going to be extending this to using an M5 stack to measure and log environmental data and send that over MQTT. So we're looking at remote environmental sensing. So that'll be quite exciting. Otherwise, well, bye.